What's up, Rovers? For those of you that clicked on this video, know that this is a follow-up to the complete Brant guide I uploaded a few days ago. This is a full team building guide for him with all team variants, gearing, and rotations. Due to its depth and length, I've chosen to split it off into its own video. Yes, you saw that right. Brant has 14 teams. Here's a ranking of how these teams perform. This won't pop up again later in the video, but it's the same ranking table as in Brant's spreadsheets. Note that due to the sheer amount of Brant's teams, I'll be more brief in explanations this time. No important info will be missing though. If you're interested in a full breakdown on everything Brant, please check out my previous video at the top right. It is assumed all Shorekeepers and Verina shown today will be using Variation, and if you don't have this, expect to perform several extra basic attacks to fill their concerto. Now, while Brant appears to fit in the subDPS slot, his flexibility allows him to play any role in practice. He's strong enough to be an actual mainDPS, albeit requires either his signature or at least R5 Emerald on Tide-Breaking Courage to be a competitive mainDPS in top meta. Because he has equal defensive potential to Shorekeeper and Verina, split as half heals, half shields, totaling 15 to 20k per rotation, he can also replace the healer slot instead. TLDR, you can put him in any slot, and thus any team. Of course, teams for him to outro amplify, or teams that buff basic damage, which is his mainDPS type, will suit him better. All teams shown today will fall under at least one of these categories. They'll be organized from easiest to hardest. Standard Conga line teams where one unit buffs the next, the Hypercarry setups to dual DPS, and finally, triple DPS. Because Brant has amazing damage for a sub-DPS with short field time, this makes him unsuitable as a main DPS unless you run the 2 Forte rotation due to low damage if he overstays his welcome. But this means he can more easily be slotted into any kind of team as a quick sub-DPS nuke. Since most of his damage scaling comes from his own kit, he is not reliant on external buffs or an insane amount of quickswaps to make his DPS relevant as a sub-DPS. Thus, you can slot Brant as the third unit in any existing dual DPS team to turn it into a triple DPS team. Now, Brant prefers to remain in the air, which both opens up more team options but restricts others. All Brant rotations used today will be based off of the original sub-DPS rotation shown here. There are 2 aerial quickswap rotation variants and 2 ground quickswap rotation variants. Their only difference is 1 or 2 quickswap windows. Notably, the aerial quickswap variants do not need his intro because its main purpose is actually to put him in aerial state, rather than the bonus Bravo generated. Aerial swap-ins on Brant are fast and skip him immediately to aerial 1 flip if he was fully despawned, allowing you to immediately go into aerial 2 charge for a much faster Forte generation. This makes up for his excessively slow intro animation, which takes 1.73 seconds and is the slowest one in the entire game. In all rotations, Brant's aerial 1 charge and aerial 2 charge will take priority, unless there is more important moves available in a different character to move timelines upwards, such as interrupting to use Carlotta skill times 2 to prepare her Forte bar early, since the normal animation for that takes nearly 4 seconds before she completes the Forte generation. All teams shown aim to be completed in 30 seconds or less, but most will finish in about 26 seconds or less, to optimize for cooldown restrictions. This allows for at least 4 full rotations in a 2-minute period with leeway. For character builds, it is assumed Brant is on either an ER weapon or Emerald of Genesis or a 5-star signature. He should not be using anything else. If he can hit 250 ER, he should be on Tide-Breaking Courage. If not, then put him on Molten Rift. Here's a quick comparison once again of Brant's weapon choices. Brant needs a minimum of 200 ER to be able to ult consistently regardless of Sonata set he chooses. Shorekeeper and Verina should be both on healer set. Shorekeeper should reach 250 ER in combat, and remember the fallacy in her inherent skill can grant another plus 10% each. Verina needs a bare minimum of 230 ER in most of these teams to ult every rotation. Certain teams will need more, such as Verina, Jinhsi, Brant requiring 250 plus, and I'll mention in these respective team sections. Now, Brant teams generally prefer Shorekeeper over Verina due to his own 25 seconds cooldown and signature weapon not having larger amounts of crit, making it harder for him to deal consistent damage. Shorekeeper can also swap in from air to land and produce more stacks or consume full Forte, whereas Verina can't really do anything there unless she has some Forte already. As Brant himself also heals and shields, healers are not mandatory in his team, and is a big part why triple DPS Brant teams work so well and are comfortable. Let's start off with Brant's most straightforward teams. I call them Conga line teams, because each unit buffs the next you swap to. For example, the popular Sanhua, Brant, Changli team, or replacing Sanhua with a healer. You can also replace Changli with Chixia. There's another variant of this, more to Sanhua Brant, which I would not recommend playing as it has far lower raw DPS and thus requires significantly higher investment to get viable damage output. These teams are all simple to play since they primarily consist of shorter rotation units like Amplify outros, minimizing the benefits or need to play them Quickswap. These teams should all rotate in roughly 23 to 26 seconds depending on using Sanhua, Verina, or Shorekeeper in the third slot. You can Quickswap one Changli Phoenix during Brant's Ashes cast to speed up the team, but note that this means it won't be buffed by his outro. Otherwise, each character runs their full rotation one by one. Sanhua can run the typical 110 ER, which is already filled by Moonlit Set's 2-piece effect. Her damage isn't high enough to use Glacio Set in TOA, but for Whimpering Waste, Glacio Set is viable. Note that Nightmare Lampy Lumen is coming next patch, and it's a summon rather than transformation, making DPS Sanhua a lot better. Changli should be on Molten Rift set with at least 120 ER with the new Nightmare Infernal Rider, since it passively buffs 12% fusion and skill. She doesn't have a great cast window for it, so you can most likely just swap cast it or completely skip it. Chixia should be also on the new Nightmare Infernal Rider because her highest damage output source is skill damage, which Brant buffs. She wants a minimum of 140 ER to ult every rotation, which makes up roughly 1/3 of her total damage output, and is required to reset her skill stacks and Forte bar. This requires at least S4 Chixia to be a viable DPS. Let's look at the team rotations. Only the first rotation is a bit messy due to lack of intros initially. Open with Sanhua's Heavy Detonate for Concerto before casting Brant's Echo, cancelling into Changli Liberation. Pre-hold Heavy for Flaming Sacrifice, and then swap cancel that into Sanhua's Pre-hold Heavy plus Liberation cancel. Only let go after the entire ult animation inside of the blue Forte and cast skill before the second detonate hit goes through to pop them instantly. Herron to outro onto Brant and immediately cast Liberation. Hold down attack through all of Aerial 2 charge, and then attack again to complete Aerial 3 plus flip. Your Forte should be full, cast Ashes, wait out the entire hit animation to keep Sanhua's buff, and then outro onto Changli. Cast Phoenix on entry and produce 3 more Inflamement stacks. You can do this by either slamming down to basic 3-4 for a free stack, or do what I did and pre-hold Heavy on a skill cast to uppercut back in the air. Attack to Phoenix and then dodge the Phoenix again. This gets 2 stacks out of 1 skill. Use your second skill cast to get the 4th Inflamement stack and then Flaming Sacrifice. Her Liberation should be off cooldown, so cast it only after Flaming's hit frame number appears. Then cast Flaming Sacrifice again, waiting until the number appears to keep Brant outro buff alive before swapping off to reset team. Immediately pre-hold Heavy and cast Liberation on Sanhua, detonating into skill cast to rinse and repeat. Very straightforward, super fast team that is only limited by cooldown. For the healer variants of Brant Changli, you can try to force extra Concerto onto Brant in first rotation, so that he can outro immediately on Ashes cast instead of waiting out the animation, as you no longer have to worry about Sanhua's outro buffs expiring. Both of these teams have one extra swap window versus Sanhua, as either Verina doesn't need her intro or Shorekeeper has long animations. This gives you an easy window to cast Brant and or Changli echoes. Otherwise, the teams proceed very similar. We open with Brant's skill plus Echo to farm some extra Forte bar. Cancel with Changli Liberation into Flaming Sacrifice before swapping back to your healer and do their rotation. If you're on Shorekeeper, you can squeeze one extra swap for another Brant skill cast chasing Forte bar. Otherwise, outro your healer onto Brant, cast Liberation immediately, and perform Aerial 2 plus charge, all of Aerial 3, and if needed, Aerial 4. Your goal is to reach 80 Concerto before casting Return from Ashes, so you can instantly skip to outro on Changli. This will add the Delayed Anchor's 30 bonus Concerto into Brant's next rotation instead. Changli casts Phoenix and then basic 3-4 for a free second stack, or pre-hold Heavy on a skill cast to uppercut back in the air. Attack to Phoenix and then dodge the Phoenix again. This gets 2 stacks out of 1 skill cast. Use second skill to get 4th Inflamement stack and then Flaming Sacrifice. Her Liberation should be off cooldown, so cast it only after Flaming's hit frame number appears. Then cast Flaming Sacrifice again, waiting until the number appears to get Brant's outro buff alive before swapping off to reset team. Shorekeeper teams reset back into her, fitting Brant's skill cast during a Shorekeeper heavy attack, whereas Verina teams will instead reset back into Brant directly. Remember to plunge down and skill cast before swapping to Verina basic 3-4-5. Shorekeeper teams can outro onto Brant to continue the second rotation, whereas Verina teams can instead double intro Changli since Brant already had his intro earlier whenever the team resets. Now for the Chixia one, this team plays very similar to Brant Changli but is slightly weaker. We set the team up to buff Chixia for uninterrupted DPS. I recommend running Shorekeeper over Verina on this team to make up for Chixia's lower raw damage. Brant is a better buffer for Chixia than Changli for 2 reasons. Brant rotates faster than Changli to better align team rotation times, and Chixia also deals more skill damage than liberation damage per rotation. Changli amplifies the liberation and Brant amplifies skill. Brant should both make Chixia teams easier to play with less swaps needed, faster rotations, and higher damage per rotation, leading to a notable DPS gain. We open with Shorekeeper basic 1-2-3, swapping off to cast Brant skill and or Echo, and Chixia skill. This gives her enough Forte to use her hold skill later. Finish Shorekeeper's rotation and activate her Liberation. We outro onto Brant, casting Liberation with the full subDPS loop, using Aerial 2 charge and Aerial 3 to fill the rest of his Forte. Cast Ashes and outro into Chixia. Hold skill for her Forte shot, casting Liberation to reset your Forte bar again, and then do one more skill hold for her Forte shot, then cast Nightmare Rider and outro to reset the team into Shorekeeper. You can run her entire rotation now with 0 swaps, then Brant, then back into Chixia again in 25 seconds or less. The next set of teams are Brant Hypercarry teams. These are a bit different than Brant buffing another Hypercarry, since Hypercarry Brant focuses on him being in the main DPS role. Additionally, he cycles his full Forte bar twice for full team rotation, requiring a lot more speed to pull off consistently, but should still only take about 24 to 27 seconds with Sanhua, depending on healer chosen. Brant double intros on these team setups, letting him set up double Forte bars faster. The only sub-DPSs that should be paired with him in these kind of teams are Sanhua or Roccia. Sanhua versions of these teams are much faster and higher overall team DPS, and well suited for general content or bossing. Roccia Brant should only be used for AoE content as needed, such as Whimpering Wastes. Roccia teams are also notably slower, requiring roughly 30 seconds to rotate Brant's Forte twice. Because Brant occupies the majority of field time, and thus most of the DPS of this team, Sanhua and Roccia should be on Moonlit Cloud set. Sanhua still only needs 110 ER, already covered by the 2-piece effect, whereas Roccia wants to be at 140 ER in this team. We'll be skipping their intro, so make sure you pay attention to the rotations used in their respective teams. For the Sanhua one, if on Shorekeeper, open with basic 1-2-3. If Verina, skip directly to Brant's skill, then swap into Sanhua pre-hold heavy. Cast her Liberation, then let go heavy in the blue Forte after it completes. Cast skill after the first detonation hit, but before the second detonation hit. Swap back to your healer and finish their rotation. This is either a series of basics into heavy Liberation and skill echo on Shorekeeper, or basic 3-4-5 plus Liberation, skill echo and aerials on Verina. Intro Brant, but don't cast his Liberation. Go through Aerial 2 charge into Aerial 3 and Aerial 4. Yes, I know. Now as soon as you land, swap back to Sanhua and cast skill. This should fill the rest of her concerto, then cast Heron and outro back into Brant. His second intro should fill the rest of his Forte bar. Cast Return from Ashes and cancel with Liberation once the big AoE hit comes out. Reset into Aerial 1 plus charge. You only need the 2 initial big swings in charge, so you can let go to skip the spin. Do all of Aerial 2 plus charge next, and then Aerial 3 plus flip. Your Forte should be full. Cast it, wait out the entire animation to keep Sanhua's buff, and outro to reset the team. If on Shorekeeper, reset onto her basic 1-2-3 and squeeze in Brant skill plus Sanhua's Liberation plus skill and detonate rotation before completing Shorekeeper's rotation. If on Verina instead, you'll reset directly onto Sanhua and immediately perform her Liberation plus skill plus detonate rotation before completing Verina's rotation. Both will then outro the healer back onto Brant for his first intro and continue. The Roccia version of Brant Hypercarry is literally identical to Sanhua. The only difference is Roccia's own non-intro rotation being more quick-swampy and complicated. Her main quick-swap rotation will be basic 2-3-4 plus skill plus Liberation, then basic 1-2-3 again, followed by second skill cast later. There may be a little bit of variations that I'll discuss when it comes up. If you're not using Mercado, you will also need to perform one single bounce after the second skill cast. On the Shorekeeper rotation, you can shift Roccia's basic 4 around as needed for quick swaps. Okay, so if on Shorekeeper, open with basic 1-2-3. Again, if on Verina, skip directly to Brant's skill. Then, regardless, swap into Roccia 2-3-4 plus skill plus Liberation and basic 1-2-3 plus Heron again. The rotation for Shorekeeper lists a variation for Roccia's basic 4 for quick swap, but you can just follow the Roccia line listed for the Verina team as well if it's too hard. Swap back to your healer and finish the rotation to outro onto Brant's. Do not cast this Liberation. Go through Aerial 2 charge into Aerial 3 and Aerial 4. As soon as you land, swap back to Roccia and cast skill. If you're not on Mercado, you'll have to perform one real fantasy bounce for it to outro back onto Brant. His second intro should fill the rest of his Forte bar. Cast Return from Ashes and cancel with Liberation once the big AoE hit comes out. Reset into Aerial 1 plus charge. You only need the 2 initial big swings in charge so you can let go to skip the spin. Do all of Aerial 2 plus charge next and then Aerial 3 plus flip. Cast Roccia's magic box tool as needed to group them. Your Forte should be full, cast it, wait out the entire animation to keep Roccia's buff, and then outro to reset the team. If on Shorekeeper, reset onto her basic 1-2-3 and squeeze in Brant's skill, plus Roccia's basic 2-3-4, plus skill, and Liberation, then basic 1-2-3 plus Heron again, before completing Shorekeeper's rotation. But if you're on Verina instead, reset directly onto Roccia, and then continue to perform the basic 4 skip ahead with skill and Liberation, then basic 1-2-3 plus Heron, before completing Verina's rotation. Both will outro the healers back onto Brant for his first intro and then continue. Now currently, because the premium fusion team is actually incomplete, Brant Jinhsi and Brant Carlotta is actually stronger than Brant Changli. This is very simple when you realize that both Jinhsi and Carlotta innately have 1.5 times the raw damage of Changli, of which all 3 focus on skill damage, which Brant amplifies, meaning fusion team is still waiting on a true main DPS to show up. The Carlotta variant is the strongest, but still about 5% behind Carlotta ideal Jojo team. This is due to Brant's higher personal damage making up for only half of his outro applying to Carlotta. Both teams rotate in 26 seconds or less, and optional quickswaps can be used to shave off 1 to 2 seconds to match cooldown limits. The Jinhsi team is simple to play, where Brant can replace either Cohort, Unit, or Verina. For ease of use, I would normally recommend replacing the Cohort. Now I'll be showcasing the Verina Brant Jinhsi today to remind you Brant needs to plunge before swapping to Verina so she can basic 3-4-5 on the ground, as she doesn't need her own intro. Carlotta should be on Frosty Resolve set with 120 ER, whereas Jinhsi should be on Celestial Light with 120 plus ER. 130 is comfortable but not needed. Verina needs at least 250 ER in both of these teams, as Brant produces less team energy than Yinlin or Jia. There's a quickswap variation of this team for Shorekeeper, which I'll explain after. Otherwise, if on Shorekeeper, Brant, Carlotta, start with basic 1-2-3. Then do Carlotta skill times 2 on both teams to get it off cooldown later. Throw in a Brant Echo cast if you want, then swap to your healer, do their entire rotation, setting up their Liberation, skill, and Echo. We outro into Brant, casting Liberation, and immediately do a standard Aerial 2 plus charge, into Aerial 3 and Forte anchor into outro. You'll be forced to wait the Ashes animation since you don't have enough Concerto to outro early. Intro Carlotta and do her standard rotation skill times 2 with the aerial plunge into pre-hold heavy before casting Liberation. Dump all 4 shots and cast Fatal Finale, resetting either into Shorekeeper or Brant for Verina teams. She plunges down to cast Echo and swap to Carlotta to cast her Echo for energy generation purposes, otherwise you'll need more than 120 ER on her. Then swap back to your healer and finish the rotation. They'll outro into Brant to continue the team. For the Shorekeeper Brant Carlotta quickswap variation, our goal is twofold. In first rotation, we lead with Carlotta's skill times 2 to get it off cooldown even faster. In all rotations, we want to skip the animation of her skill times 2 plus airtime during her dedicated DPS window. This means we need to swap out of Brant's rotation early to set up Carlotta's extra skill times 2, since it should also be off cooldown early. It plays out and produces Forte while we're finishing Brant's rotation. This shaves off roughly 2 seconds on the team rotation overall, bring it down to 24 to 25 to match team ult cooldowns. As stated, we open with Carlotta's skill times 2 first, Echo and Brant if you want, then starting complete Shorekeeper's entire rotation with 2 times Forte bar heavies plus Liberation, skills, and Echo since everything will be on cooldown. Intro into Brant ASAP and plunge. Swap to Carlotta before you fall and plunge with her also to skip her swap and kick. Pre-hold heavy to immediately get molding crystals and swap back to Brant Liberation. Do his non-hold aerial chain all the way to Aerial 3. Swap back to Carlotta and slam down. Her skill should be off cooldown again. Cast skill times 2 to burn the crystals from earlier as well for plus 50% Forte bar and swap back to Brant. Cast ground skill to launch in air, filling the rest of your Forte bar and cast Return from Ashes. It should immediately let you outro to Carlotta without needing to wait out the animation by overcapping your Concerto. Pre-hold heavy on her and immediately cast Liberation. Dump all 4 death knells plus Fatal Finale. Then do not heavy attack. skill times 2 and outro. We don't heavy beforehand here because this team rotates too fast, and Carlotta's skill will still be on cooldown next rotation. Moving the heavy into next rotation wastes just enough time to align with her skill cooldown. So we reset back into Shorekeeper plus basic 1, 2, 3, swap to Carlotta Echo for energy, then Brant Echo 2 for damage. Swap back to your healer and finish their rotation. Plunge on him and swap to Carlotta again before you fall, and plunge with her to skip the swap and kick again. Pre-hold heavy to make 3 Molding Crystals and swap back to Brant Liberation to continue aerial 1, 2, 3. Swap back to Carlotta and slam down. Her skill should have just come off cooldown. Cast skill times 2, then swap back to Brant to ground skill plus Forte to early outro into Carlotta and continue the rotation. As you can see, moving the heavy attack into the next rotation for Carlotta wastes just enough time for her skill cooldown to end. Now for the Jinhsi team, note that this team is not noticeably stronger than Jinhsi's ideal teams in DPS and is only roughly comparable. This is due to Brant's excessively high personal damage as a sub-DPS, while also being a 25% amplifier for Jinhsi, but depending entirely on Verina's Liberation for coordinated hits to stack Jinhsi's Forte bar. While Brant is strong and brings strong buffs, you're losing a true Coord 5-star unit with near 100% uptime on Coord to stack Jinhsi's Forte bar. Thus, Brant not only deals less damage than a main DPS, but the unit he's buffing also deals less raw damage than normal. Most of Jinhsi's damage comes from her Forte bar, and in a good team she usually averages at least 40 stacks or higher, or 80% of her bar full. Verina Brant Jinhsi never passes about 30 to 35% or 15 to 18 stacks. Jinhsi as a result loses roughly 25 to 30% of her overall personal damage output in this team versus Judge Jinhsi or Yinlin Jinhsi. Now, while this is almost entirely mitigated by Brant's skill amplify, remember that in Judge teams, Jinhsi loses 0% of her personal damage and also has a 25% skill amplify, whereas Yinlin just has higher raw damage. Brant's personal damage cannot fully make up for both Yinlin or Judge's damage, as well as Jinhsi's missing 25 to 30% of her personal damage output. Thus, this Brant Jinhsi team is very dependent on Brant having a signature weapon to perform well. This team is not that different from Changli Jinhsi in damage potential, but loses Changli's advantage of being able to front load damage on her ult whenever she wants, which is what made Changli Jinhsi popular in speedruns. Anyways, with the explanation of this team out of the way, let's play. Open with Brant's skill cast and swap into Verina Liberation. Then Jinhsi jump cancel rotation to set her outro up faster for Forte stacking in the future. Basic 2-3-4 plus skill with the Liberation cancel. Then throw your Jue Echo out and spam jump while basic attacking. Then skill as soon as Dragon Puke is available. Outro into Brant, plunge to ground and skill. Cancel into Verina basic 3-4-5 before you leave the ground. Skill Echo and aerials to outro back into Brant. This time cast his Liberation. Then aerial 2 plus charge. And you should have just enough to cast his Forte and immediately outro cancel without needing to wait out the animation. Intro Jinhsi was standard incarnation skill plus basic 1-2-3, then Crescent Divinity, before basic 4 plus Puke and outro to Brant to reset the team. Plunge down and skill before swap cancelling to Verina basic 3-4-5 to continue the team rotation. It is very possible for this team to run 1 second faster than Jinhsi incarnation cooldowns. And if you're going faster than Brant cooldowns, just start aerial 2 charge early, and ult cancel as soon as it's available. It barely slows down rotation doing this when it happens, since Brant already has double intro, plus an extra skill cast already. The following section includes the hardest Brant teams, but are incredibly satisfying to play. The focus on Brant's short rotations and aerial gameplay allowing very quick swamps to fill the role a healer would normally cover, allowing you to run 2 DPS plus Brant or 1 DPS and 1 sub-DPS plus Brant. This works because Brant's self-buff makes him not reliant on the team to work as a quick sub-DPS nuke. Aerial teams are easier to play because it allows Brant to re-enter swap-ins with the aerial 1 flip, immediately granting you access to aerial 2 charge, his fastest Forte generator tool. This removes the need for his intro, which is normally used to reset him in air when paired with ground quickswap units. Brant's potential triple DPS partners include picking any 2 out of Changli, Jinhsi, Carlotta, or Changli Yao. I would not recommend running double ground units with him, aka Carlotta Yao Brant, as it makes Brant's quickswaps a lot more restrictive, since he always wants to be in the air, whereas Carlotta and Yao still prefer being on the ground even if they can be in the air. Focus will remain on maximizing DPS with faster rotations while making best use of outro amplified buffs, cancels, and swamps. Here's a very quick reminder of how each triple DPS team ranks for Brant. Now the gap between each team is quite narrow, but the 30 seconds Carlotta Jinhsi 2x Puke team is quite uncomfortable to play. Let's get into it. Jinhsi Brant Carlotta consists of 2 variants, a 2x Jinhsi Puke and a 1x Jinhsi Puke rotation. It also determines who Brant will buff with outro, and 2x Puke Brant buffs Jinhsi, whereas in 1x Puke Brant buffs Carlotta. I personally consider this team one of the weaker TripleDPS teams for 2 reasons. If you do 2 Dragon Pukes, the team rotation times force Brant to buff Jinhsi, who has a smaller Forte bar because she already puked once. If you do 1 Dragon Puke only, Brant can buff Carlotta, who's the stronger of the 2, but the team also deals less damage because Jinhsi only used 1 puke instead of 2. The team also has slower rotations because Carlotta cannot be swapped off during her ult, and Jinhsi cannot be swapped off if she's buffed by Brant's outro. Therefore, this team ranks lowest on my TripleDPS list and is ironically also one of the hardest teams to play today if you go the 2x Dragon Puke route. Jinhsi should be on 120 plus ER on Celestial Light so she can Liberation every rotation, whereas Carlotta should be on 120 ER with the new Frosty Resolve set. We'll start with this simpler 1x Dragon Puke rotation first. Lead with Carlotta's 2x skill and cast Brant Echo before swapping into a Jinhsi jump cancel opener. Basic 2-3-4 plus skill with a Liberation cancel. Throw your Jui Echo out and spam jump while basic attacking, then skill as soon as Dragon Puke is available. Outro into Brant and do a standard subDPS rotation with Aerial 4 plus charge into Aerial 3. Then outro into Carlotta, waiting out the anchor animation for Concerto. Cast her skill times 2 with the aerial reset into pre-hold Forte heavy, then her ult, cycling through all 4 death knells. Then close out with Fatal Finale before resetting the team into Jinhsi. Loop back into Brant and Carlotta after the Dragon Puke to continue. It's very easy to play, with basically 0 quick swaps whatsoever, and still deals pretty good damage since it gives time for Jinhsi to build her Forte bar. This team rotates in about 25 seconds if you do everything right. Now the 2x Dragon Puke version deals less damage than expected because Jinhsi can only fill about 40 to 45% of her Forte bar each time. It is still stronger than the 1x Dragon Puke version of this team, but relies on using Jinhsi jump cancel every rotation to save time, while feeding intros into Brant to speed up his rotations. Because Carlotta's forced to stay on field during ult, and Brant outros onto Jinhsi, there's roughly 15 seconds every full team rotation where you cannot swap off, increasing this team's overall team rotation time to 30 seconds long. We open with Carlotta skill times 2 and Brant Echo skill. Manual swap to Jinhsi jump cancel. Basic 2-3-4 plus skill and Liberation cancel. Throw your Jui Echo out and spam jump while basic attacking, then skill as soon as Dragon Puke is available. Outro into Brant and perform a standard subDPS rotation with the Aerial 2 plus charge into Aerial 3. Then cast Forte, swap to Carlotta and perform skill times 2 to pre-charge her Forte, then swap back to Brant who now has full Concerto. Immediately outro into Jinhsi and do a second Puke rotation. Incarnation skill into basic 1-2-3, Crescent Divinity skill cancel, then Incarnation basic 4 into Dragon Puke. Outro into Carlotta. Pre-hold heavy and immediately cast Liberation. Dump all 4 death knells plus Fatal Finale, then heavy attack plus skill times 2 to produce half Forte bar and outro back onto Brant to reset team. He should plunge to the ground, swap cancel Carlotta's Echo for Liberation energy, and perform another Jinhsi jump cancel. Basic 2-3-4 plus skill with a Liberation cancel. Throw Jui Echo out again and spam jump while basic attacking, then skill as soon as Dragon Puke is available. We outro into Brant again and eventually quickswap to Carlotta during return from Ashe's cast. Set up Carlotta's skill times 2 to pre-charge our Forte, then swap back to Brant who now has full Concerto. Immediately outro into Jinhsi to do her second Dragon Puke again, then outro into Carlotta DPS. The next team is probably my favorite Brant team of all, Jinhsi, Brant, Changli. This entire team can be played in the air, which allows us to skip Brant's intro to feed Changli double intro. It allows the team to rotate super fast, consistently swapping back to Jinhsi in time for every incarnation cast, without wasting time. The few ground moments also let us squeeze in an extra Brant skill cast to push his Concerto high enough that he can outro and return to Ashe's cast instead of relying on the anchor hit bonus Concerto. We can align Changli's Liberation outro buff for Jinhsi's ult as well. Changli should be on 125 ER with the Molten Rift set, because the only time Changli touches the ground in this team is after she casts Liberation, which is followed by Flaming Sacrifice and swap off. She has no time to cast Nightmare Inferno Rider anywhere. Therefore, higher ER helps a lot for her to rotate smoothly. Jinhsi should be on 120 plus ER in Celestial Light so she can Liberation every rotation, which will be bought by Changli's outro. To play this team, open with Brant's ground skill and cast Aerial 1. Immediately swap to Changli, not waiting for his Aerial 1 flip. Cast her Liberation into Flaming Sacrifice, and then swap to Jinhsi to perform Jump Cancel first rotation. Basic 2-3-4 plus skill with the Liberation cancel. Throw your Jui Echo out and spam jump while basic attacking, then skill as soon as Dragon Puke is available. Outro into Changli, Phoenix, and cast skill. Swap to Brant, which you should use his Aerial 1 flip. Once a flip shoots the enemy for Bravo, cancel with his Liberation. If you did it right, attacking after should start from Aerial 2. Hold down for Aerial 2 charge until Aerial 2 flip and swap off to Changli Phoenix. Swap back to Brant before he falls down and cast Aerial 1 charge. Cast Forte as soon as your bar is full, and you should be able to outro to Jinhsi again without needing to wait out Return from Ashes. Do her Standard Incarnation skill into Basic 1-2-3, Crescent Divinity skill cancel, and then Incarnation Basic 4 into Dragon Puke. Outro into Changli and Phoenix. Skill and slam down, stab the enemy and cast Flaming Sacrifice. Outroing back to Jinhsi, and her Incarnation should still be on cooldown, so slam down in the meantime. Cast skill plus Liberation cancel to benefit from Changli's plus 25% amplify. If you can, swap into Brant here to cast ground skill. If he's in the air, he won't be able to, but will use Aerial 1 flip swap in instead. Either one of these two is fine. Swap to Changli to cast Liberation plus Flaming. Optionally, swap to Brant to cast Dragon of Dirge Echo before swapping back to Jinhsi for basic 1-2-3, plus Crescent Divinity cancel and last basic 4 into Dragon Puke. Outro into Changli again and cast Phoenix plus skill. Aerial swap cancel into Brant, casting Aerial 1 flip. Wait until the flip performs for Concerto and Forte, then cast Liberation. Continue into Aerial 2 charge and swap to Changli once Aerial 2 flip begins. She will Phoenix again, then rush swap back to Brant to finish his Aerial 1 charge. Cast Forte as soon as your bar is full partway through the spin and outro back onto Jinhsi again. Use Incarnation to set up her Dragon Puke, then outro into Changli again to Phoenix and skill to get her last hit flame and stack for Flaming Sacrifice. Outro into Jinhsi and rinse and repeat. Now the next team is very fun. Changli, Brant, Carlotta, but is primarily limited by cooldowns on skill casts of, well, Changli and Carlotta. You'll notice some different rotation decisions as a result of me trying to play around these limitations. Changli functions as a Quickswap DPS tool here, wrapping around Brant's rotation to buff Carlotta. While I normally wouldn't advocate using Aerial 1 charge, as it is a slower Forte generator than Aerial 2 charge, there isn't really anything else to do while waiting on timers in this team, and doing Aerial 1 charge twice still produces more Forte than Aerial 1 flip plus Aerial 2 charge, and there isn't enough time to do Aerial 1 flip with Aerial 2 charge twice. Please keep this in mind for this team. Changli should be on Molten Rift set at 125 ER in this team, because she's either always in the air or swap cancelling a long move. There's no window for her to cast Inferno Rider in this team, thus you'll need to rely on a bit higher ER. Carlotta should be on 120 ER with the new Frosty Resolve set. Casting Sentry Construct is mandatory to manage Carlotta's energy properly, otherwise you'll need 130 ER. Because this team includes a ground DPS, Carlotta, Brant will require his own intro. We open with Changli's skill and to Carlotta's skill ×2 to immediately put it on cooldown. Cast Brant's Echo if desired, then cast Changli Liberation fast enough to prevent True Sight being used. Pre-hold Flaming Sacrifice and swap to Brant, who will be on the ground. Cast skill before Liberation for Forte and Concerto. Then perform Aerial 1 charge plus flip. You can even cast Aerial 2 plus swap if desired after. Swap to Changli Phoenix, dodge, and skill cast again. Swap back to Brant to perform another Aerial 1 plus charge. If any hits miss, you can once again cast Aerial 2 before swapping off to Changli again, as there's leeway. Phoenix on her for second stack, then dodge before casting skill a third time. Swap to Carlotta and slam down to cast heavy plus skill ×2 to pre-charge another 50% of her Forte bar right as it comes off cooldown. Swap back to Changli immediately for the stab, then swap to Brant and cast Forte. Early outro, when Carlotta converts the Molding Crystals into Forte, visualize with the Ice Crystal vignette on the screen. Pre-hold heavy and immediately cast her Liberation. Dump all 4 Death Knells plus Fatal Finale, then heavy attack plus skill ×2 to produce half Forte bar, and outro into Changli. Phoenix and slam down to Flaming Sacrifice before outroing back to Brant to reset the team. Perform Aerial 2 plus flip and swap off to Changli's skill plus Liberation. Flaming Sacrifice and cast Carlotta's Echo for Liberation energy before swapping to Brant. cast his Liberation and do aerial 1 charge again, swapping back to Changli for Phoenix plus dodge and do another skill cast. Go back to Brant for another aerial 1 plus flip, then slam down to Carlotta to cast skill times 2 since it should have just come off cooldown. Swap back to Changli for a stab, then swap to Brant and cast Forte. As Carlotta's Ice Vignet triggers again, you can outro into her to nuke with her ult. Then finish off with Changli again before resetting the team to Brant. Now, Changli Brant Yao is my second favorite Brant team as it's a spin on the original Changli Yao Shorekeeper team. Updated for new Quickswap tech that we've learned along the way, this team makes use of all buffing outros correctly, making sure to buff Changli's biggest skill hits with Brant and buff Yao's biggest initial Liberation cast with Changli. It also runs faster than cooldowns, meaning you have a little bit of leeway for mistakes. Changli only needs 120 ER in this team, running Molten Rift. Once again, there isn't a good moment to cast her Nightmare Inferno Rider, so you'll be relying on her raw energy generation for her ult. Yao also wants 120 ER in this team as he is using a shorter rotation that doesn't use his normal skill much except in the opener first rotation for Concerto. This is because his skill will give him extra Concerto we don't want. He should be on 5-piece Void Thunder, but he doesn't really have a good window to cast this Echo. 2-piece Yao still works too if you'd rather use Mech Abomination, which can be casted right before his Liberation. Open with Yao's heavy attack if you're using 5-piece Void Thunder, then cast Echo and swap to Brand Ground skill. Immediately cancel with Changli Liberation plus Flaming Sacrifice. Swap back to Yao and cast normal skill for Concerto, then Liberation and Uppercut skill. Quick swap to Changli skill, then pass over swap Brant without any input. This will cause him to aerial 1 flip for Concerto and 10 Bravo as you swap back to Yao for Revamp Slam and First Law of Reigns. Cancel with Brant Liberation and go for aerial 1 charge, swapping to Changli as it ends for Phoenix plus Slam into basic 3-4. Swap to Yao and pause for a half second to realign swamp timers. Cast Uppercut skill, swapping back to Changli to stab for second Inflamement and recast skill. Pass over swap Brant again with no input to use another aerial 1 flip for Concerto and 10 Bravo. Then quick swap to Yao again to finish the Revamp Slam for second Law of Reigns. Swap to Changli for stab third Inflamement, then swap back to Yao to cast Liberation basic 1-2. Immediately swap to Brant to cast Ground skill, which should get him to 75 Bravo. Swap back in time to Yao's basic 3 to complete the third Law of Reigns and outro onto Brant. It should immediately fill the rest of his Bravo, and his Concerto should be high enough to casting Return from Ashes. We'll let him in immediately outro and skip the cast animation. Phoenix on Changli for 4th Inflamement stack, and you should now be able to Flaming Sacrifice into Liberation and Flaming Sacrifice again. Do not outro until the second Flaming damage hits to maintain Brant's outro buff on her. This is where the team resets. Intro Yao, heavy if on 5-piece Void Thunder, Echo if on 2-piece Mech Abomination, and recast your Liberation. It may have been on a 1 second's cooldown if you went too fast. Uppercut skill again, swapping to Changli's skill, and then pass over swap Brant for his first aerial 1 flip for extra Bravo and Concerto. Swap back to Yao in time to cast Revamp Slam and First Law of Reigns and Liberation cancel onto Brant. You no longer need to aerial 1 charge on second rotation onwards, because he has the carryover Concerto from last rotation's Return from Ashes. Perform just the normal aerial 1 plus flip and instantly swap to Changli Phoenix plus Slam. Basic 3-4 and swap to Yao to pause for half a second, then cast Uppercut skill. Swap back to Changli Stab plus skill, then the second passover swap to Brant for aerial 1 flip. Before coming back to Yao Revamp Slam for his second Law of Reigns. Swap to Changli Stab again for third Inflamement, then back to Yao for Liberation basic 1-2. Squeeze in another Brant Ground skill while waiting and swap back to Yao in time to cast basic 3 plus his last Law of Reigns. Outro cancel onto Brant, who should now have a full Forte bar and cast Return from Ashes. This once again should let him instantly outro early into Changli, who will Phoenix for a 4th Inflamement stack. Flaming into Liberation, plus second Flaming Sacrifice again, waiting out the damage numbers before outroing onto Yao. Now for the final team, it's actually limited by Yao's longer rotations and Jinhsi needing 2 Dragon Pukes, with one being buffed by Brant so she can't swap off. Regardless, Jinhsi, Brant, Yao, it should be possible to complete this team in about 26 seconds, making it run close to cooldown limitations. We'll delay Jinhsi's Dragon Puke slightly in the top half of every rotation since we want to complete Yao's second Law of Reigns before she outros. You'll see this in the run. Jinhsi should be on 120 plus ER and Celestial Light so she can Liberation every rotation, which is an important tool in this run for resetting swap timers, so make sure she has enough. Yao still wants 120 ER on this team, as he's using a shorter rotation that doesn't use his normal skill much, except in the opener for Concerto, otherwise it will produce too much Concerto in the later rotations. He should be on 5-piece Void Thunder, but he doesn't really have a good window to cast his Echo. 2-piece Yao still works if you'd rather use Mech Abomination, which can be casted right before his Liberation. Now open with Yao's skill plus heavy and 5-piece Void Thunder, otherwise you can skip his heavy. Then cast Echo and swap to Brant, Tooth Brown skill for Concerto and Forte. Immediately swap to Jinhsi to cast basic 2-3 and swap Liberation cancel with Yao as soon as their basic 3 begins. The blue dragon should not be fully on screen yet when you swap. Cast Yao's skill, then swap back to Jinhsi to complete basic 4 in time to grant Incarnation. Cast that skill and immediately Liberation cancel the animation. Cast Crescent Divinity skill and swap back to Yao to revamp Slam for his first Law of Reigns. Yes, we did that much during his uppercut. Go back to Jinhsi, Echo and cast Incarnation basic 1-2, then go back to Yao and cast Liberation basic 1-2. Swap back to Jinhsi and cast Incarnation basic 3 plus Crescent Divinity if you still haven't yet, then go back to Yao to complete basic 3 Laser Beam to cast his second Law of Reigns, and finally swap back to complete Jinhsi's Dragon Puke to outro onto Brant. Immediately cast his Liberation and go into Aerial 2-charge Spin. Swap to Yao and slam down to cast Uppercut skill. Immediately swap back to Brant to cast Aerial 1 plus Flit. Mash swap back to Yao to cast Revamp Slam in time and use his third Law of Reigns to outro back onto Brant. This double intro should fill the rest of his Forte bar. Cast Return from Ashes and immediately outro cancel into Jinhsi since he should have enough Concerto to do so. Form Jinhsi's entire standard rotation, intro plus Incarnation skill into basic 1-2-3 plus Crescent Divinity cancel. Then basic 4 plus Puke before outro back into Yao to reset the team. Cast Heavy if on Void Thunder, Mech Abomination if not. Liberation into Uppercut skill and swap to cast Brant's Echo. Swap back to Yao to revamp Slam down for first Law of Reigns. Round swap to Jinhsi for a basic 2-3-4 plus Incarnation skill. Immediately swap off to Yao to perform Liberation 1-2, then swap Liberation cancel on Jinhsi. Cast a basic or 2 in Crescent Divinity, then swap back to Yao to complete basic 3 Laser Beam if he's still in animation, else basic 1-2 to fill his Forte and cast second Law of Reigns. Swap back to Jinhsi, finish her Incarnation basics to cast Puke, and outro onto Brant. Immediately cast this Liberation and Aerial 2 without Spin. Swap to Yao and slam down, then cast his Uppercut skill. Swap back to Brant for a quick Aerial 1 and mash swap back to Yao to complete his Revamp Slam for third Law of Reigns. Intro again to Brant, whose Forte should now be full. Cast Ashes and outro cancel into Jinhsi to do her rotation, before resetting back onto Yao. Fun, right? And that's it for the Brant team building guide. Thank you so much for watching through this entire video. I hope this has been useful for setting up and playing his teams. As a reminder, all spreadsheets documenting my testing can be found in the description and pinned comment. If you need a refresher on Brant himself, do feel free to check out his complete guide down there too. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Stick around if you want to see interesting videos. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you all next time.